Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My dad worked two jobs just to keep our beat-up sedan running, and I learned to drive in that same car when I turned 16. The thing barely started half the time and had duct tape holding the passenger side mirror on. When I moved out at 18, I bought my first car for $800 from some guy on the internet. It was a disaster on wheels, but it got me to work and back. For the next 12 years, I drove nothing but used cars that broke down constantly. I became an expert at roadside repairs and always kept jumper cables in my trunk. My friend Karen had a different perspective on my transportation situation. Every time my car had issues, she'd roll her eyes and tell me to just get a new car already, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Easy for her to say. She came from money and had never worried about a car payment in her life. Her parents bought her first car, and when that one got old, they helped her get another. Meanwhile, I was putting every spare dollar into a savings account, dreaming of the day I could walk into a dealership and buy something reliable. The breaking point came when trade tensions started heating up and car prices began climbing. I realized if I didn't act soon, I might miss my chance entirely. After years of saving and careful budgeting, I finally had enough for a decent down payment. The day I drove my new car off the lot was one of the best days of my life. It wasn't anything fancy, just a reliable sedan with good gas mileage, but it was mine. Brand new with that new car smell and 0 miles on the odometer. I felt like I'd accomplished something huge. My sister, who's also my roommate, was almost as excited as I was. She kept asking if we could drive places just so she could ride in the new car. Since I was feeling generous and wanted to show it off, I agreed to drive everywhere for the first few weeks. During one of our drives, my sister asked if I'd told Karen about the car yet. I said I hadn't mentioned it because I wasn't sure if she'd care, and honestly, I didn't want to find out if she didn't. The truth was, I knew Karen well enough to predict her reaction. She'd probably make some dismissive comment about how it took me long enough, or act like buying a new car was no big deal. I didn't want to deal with that. When your friends succeed at something they've worked hard for, you're supposed to be happy for them. You check out their new car and celebrate with them. I wasn't sure Karen would do that, and I didn't want my feelings hurt. But my sister had other ideas. While we were driving to Karen's house for a casual hangout, she decided to call ahead and tell Karen about my new car, saying we were driving over so she could see it. I wanted to grab the phone and hang up, but it was too late. When we pulled into Karen's driveway, I watched through the windshield as her front door opened. She stuck her head out and looked directly at me in the driver's seat. She told us it was nice, then immediately started talking about training her puppy not to jump on people, and warned us not to pet him when we got inside. Then she closed the door without even looking at the car. I sat there for a moment, staring at her closed door. My sister looked at me with sympathy and said she was sorry, thinking Karen would be more excited. I told her it was fine and that I was probably being too sensitive, but it wasn't fine. It hurt exactly like I thought it would. I decided right then that I wouldn't bring it up again. If she ever got a new car, I'd return the exact same energy she'd just given me. 2 months later, I got a text from Karen saying some drunk driver had totaled her car the night before while it was parked outside her house. I felt bad for her, but I also thought about how long it would probably take her to get a new one. Her car wasn't even paid off yet, so she'd have to deal with insurance and financing. I figured it would be months before she found something. I was wrong. Less than a week later, my phone buzzed with another message from Karen asking if I wanted to go to the pool party at our friend's house. She offered to pick me up in her new car. When she pulled into my driveway, I looked at her shiny new vehicle and made a decision. I got in without saying a word about it. She immediately started talking about how nice it was and mentioned that the dealer gave her a great deal because of the accident. I nodded and immediately changed the subject to something else. Every time she mentioned the car during our drive, I deflected or ignored the comment entirely. When we arrived at the pool party, our host came running out to admire Karen's new ride. I walked straight inside without looking back, Through the window, I could see Karen showing off all the features, while our friend nodded enthusiastically. The drive home was when things got interesting. Karen couldn't handle being ignored anymore and started getting less subtle about fishing for compliments. She bragged about how the car got 30 miles per gallon and said that was pretty impressive. I simply replied that mine got 40. She looked surprised that I'd responded, but not in a good way. Then she started going on about the backup camera and how amazing the resolution was. I told her it was nice in the exact same flat, uninterested tone she'd used 2 months earlier. I could see her grip tighten on the steering wheel. Next, she mentioned that the sound system had 12 speakers. I just said cool and left it at that. By the time we reached my house, she looked frustrated and confused. When I got out of the car, she finally cracked and asked if everything was okay, saying I seemed weird about her car. I told her everything was fine and thanked her for the ride. I closed the door and walked toward my house, leaving her sitting in her driveway. Through my window, I watched her sit there for a full minute before finally driving away. I've been going to the same family-owned drive-in restaurant my entire life. My parents took me there when I was a kid, and now at 30, I still make regular trips with friends, family, and my wife's relatives. This place has been a local institution for 70 years, opening every spring and closing in October. They serve classic American food, burgers, hot dogs, onion rings, fries, and tons of ice cream options. The restaurant has 2 service windows. One serves hot food like burgers and fries, while the other serves ice cream, shakes, and frozen treats. The ice cream window always moves faster since they just scoop and serve, while the hot food takes a bit longer to prepare. Here's where my story begins. I'm lactose intolerant, though I'll admit I sometimes ignore it when something really appeals to me. But most of the time, especially at this drive-in, I prefer to order fries or a hot dog instead of ice cream. I'm honestly just a huge fan of their fries. They're crispy, perfectly salted, and I could eat them every day. The problem is that whenever I go with groups, everyone else always orders ice cream. Every single time. Cones, sundaes, milkshakes, you name it. And every single time I order fries. This means while everyone else gets their treats in about 2 minutes from the fast ice cream line, I have to wait an extra 5 to 10 minutes for my fries from the hot food window. It's not a huge deal to me, but apparently it's a massive inconvenience to everyone else. The complaint started about 20 years ago when I was just 10 years old. At first, it was my parents making comments. My dad would ask why I couldn't just get ice cream like everyone else. My mom would sigh and say we were all waiting on me again. When I got older and started going with friends, the comments continued. My best friend would complain that everyone was done eating while I was still waiting for fries. I'd tell him to just start eating and that I didn't mind waiting, but he'd argue that they couldn't leave without me. I never asked anyone to wait for me to eat. I always told them to go ahead and enjoy their ice cream while I waited for my food. But they insisted on waiting, then complained about having to wait. When I got married, my wife's family joined the chorus of complaints. Last summer, we went with my mother-in-law and her sister. My mother-in-law complained that I couldn't just order ice cream for once and that we'd been sitting there for 15 minutes. I pointed out it had only been 5 minutes and that I told everyone to start eating. My wife's aunt called it inconsiderate to make everyone wait. I reminded them that nobody had to wait and they could eat their ice cream, but my mother-in-law insisted that we were a group and should eat together. This has been going on for 2 decades now. Different people, same complaints. Sometimes it's playful teasing, other times it's straight-up angry criticism. I've been called selfish, inconsiderate, and worse. Last month, things reached a breaking point. I went with my wife, her brother, and his girlfriend. As usual, they all ordered ice cream and I ordered fries. My brother-in-law rolled his eyes and asked if it was seriously going to be fries again. I told him yes, it was fries again because I like fries. His girlfriend Karen started lecturing me about how rude this was and how everyone was waiting because of me. I told her she didn't have to wait and could eat her ice cream. Karen said that wasn't the point. She explained that when you're in a group, you should order from the same window so everyone can leave together. I asked why I should have to change what I want to eat just because she wants to leave faster. She claimed it was common courtesy and that everyone else was being considerate by ordering ice cream. I pointed out that they were ordering ice cream because that's what they wanted, and I was ordering fries because that's what I wanted. Karen accused me of being selfish and making everything about me. I'd spent 20 years listening to people complain about my food choices, and I was done. I told her she was right. I was making this about me. I explained that it was my money, my taste buds, and my choice what to eat. I suggested that if waiting 5 extra minutes ruined her entire day, maybe she should examine her priorities. Karen asked me to excuse her. I continued, telling her I'd been coming there for 30 years and had never once complained about what anyone else orders. I'd never demanded someone change their order to match mine, but somehow I was the problem because I liked fries instead of ice cream. She insisted it was about being part of the group. I told her it wasn't, it was about her wanting to control what other people eat. I pointed out that she got exactly what she wanted to eat but was angry that I also got what I wanted. Karen claimed it wasn't the same thing. I told her it was exactly the same thing, and the only difference was that she was entitled enough to think her preferences should dictate everyone else's choices. She huffed and stormed off to eat her ice cream in the car. My brother-in-law followed her, shaking his head at me like I was the unreasonable one. But I wasn't done. When we were leaving, I walked up to the manager, who I'd known since I was a kid. I asked him if he thought it was rude when someone orders hot food while their friends order ice cream. The manager looked confused and said it wasn't rude at all, people should order what they want to eat. I thanked him and said that's what I thought too. I walked back to the car where Karen was pouting. I told her I'd just talked to the manager and he said people should order what they want to eat. I added that it was a crazy concept, wasn't it? Karen didn't speak to me for the rest of the night, which honestly made the evening much more pleasant. A week later, my brother-in-law called me. He said he'd been thinking about what happened at the drive-in. He admitted he'd never actually tried their fries and asked if they were good. I told him they were amazing. He said maybe next time he'd get fries too, and he did. The next time we went, he ordered fries. Karen got ice cream and complained that now she had to wait for both of us. But this time, my brother-in-law told her the same thing I've been saying for years. She could start eating without us. I still go to that drive-in regularly. I still order fries when everyone else gets ice cream. And I still don't care if people have to wait an extra 5 minutes. Because at the end of the day, I'm paying for my food and I'm going to order what I want to eat. The complaints have mostly stopped, probably because people realized I'm not going to change. And honestly, their fries are worth every minute of the wait. I work night shifts at the hospital as a security guard, so I sleep during the day. My neighbor didn't like that I had cameras pointing toward the street, claiming they were invading her privacy even though they were clearly on my own property. She tried getting the homeowners association involved, called the police multiple times, and even tried to get the city to force me to remove them. Nothing worked because I wasn't doing anything wrong. The harassment escalated over the months. She would blast music during the day when she knew I was trying to sleep, let her dog do its business on my lawn, and even threw trash over my fence a few times. I documented everything but tried to keep the peace. I just wanted to live quietly. Last month, things got really weird. I started noticing she would walk by my house more often, always staring at my basement windows. My basement is partially above ground, so you can see inside if you really try. I caught her a few times on camera, just standing there looking, but she would leave when she noticed the camera moving. Then came the day that changed everything. I was getting ready for work around 10 p.m. when I heard some shuffling sounds outside. I checked my phone to look at the live camera feed and saw her crouched by my basement window with what looked like a cardboard box. At first, I thought maybe she was leaving another nasty surprise for me, but then I saw her trying to open my basement window. I was about to go outside when I realized she had actually managed to get the window open. She was reaching into the box and pulling out what looked like small animals. I zoomed in on my phone and saw what was happening. She was literally putting rats into my basement through the window. I stayed inside and kept watching because this was really happening. She must have put at least 6 or 7 rats through that window before she tried to close it and leave. But here's where it gets good. When she was trying to close the window, one of the rats must have gotten scared and jumped back out, landing right on her shoulder. She started freaking out immediately. She began yelling and telling the rat to get off her while swatting at it wildly. The rat ran down her back and she panicked even more. Then another one appeared at the window opening, making her lose control completely. Instead of just walking away, she tried to grab the rats to put them back through the window. Big mistake. More rats started coming out of the window and she was surrounded by them. One ran up her leg and somehow got under her shirt. That's when the real show started. She began doing this crazy dance, jumping around and shaking her whole body, trying to get the rat out from under her clothes. She was screaming for someone to help her and begging for someone to get it out. But it was past 10 p.m. and no one else was around. The rat was clearly trapped under her shirt and was probably just as scared as she was. She kept doing this bizarre wiggling dance, pulling at her shirt and jumping up and down. Then she fell down on my lawn, still screaming and crying. The rat was still under her shirt and she just lay there sobbing, while it was clearly moving around, trying to find a way out. She was scratching at herself, probably making it worse for both her and the poor animal. I was recording all of this on my phone through the camera system because I knew no one would believe this story otherwise. She lay there for at least 10 minutes crying and occasionally shrieking when the rat moved. Finally, I decided to call the police because her screaming was getting really loud and I was worried the neighbors would think someone was being attacked. I called and told them I needed police at my address because my neighbor was on my lawn screaming and I thought she might be hurt. The dispatcher asked if she was responsive and if I needed an ambulance. I explained that she was screaming and crying but seemed okay and that it was complicated. When the police arrived about 15 minutes later, she had managed to get the rat out somehow, but she was still lying on my lawn crying. Her shirt was torn and she had scratches all over her arms. The officers tried to figure out what happened, and that's when I came outside with my phone. One officer asked her what had happened there. She claimed she was just walking by when rats attacked her out of nowhere. I told the officer that I had the whole thing on video if he wanted to see what really happened. Her face went completely white when I said that. The officer looked at the footage on my phone. The officer asked her if it was correct that she had been putting rats into my basement. She sat there crying and shaking her head. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges for breaking and entering, vandalism, and whatever other laws she broke. Honestly, watching her get terrorized by her own revenge plan was punishment enough. The video was pure gold. I told him no and that I thought she had learned her lesson. I just asked him to please make sure she stayed away from my property. They made her pay for pest control to come get the remaining rats out of my basement and warned her about trespassing. She hasn't looked at me since that night. When she sees me outside, she literally turns around and goes the other way. I still watch that video sometimes when I need a good laugh. The part where she's doing the rat dance is absolutely hilarious. I work in game quality assurance, which means I get paid to break video games and then write detailed reports about exactly how and why they broke. I started in this field because I love gaming, and the idea of helping make games better before they reach players seemed like a dream job. My first company was amazing. The lead quality assurance manager there was this veteran guy who taught me everything about exploratory testing. That's where you go off script and try to break things in creative ways that players might actually do. He always told me that the best bugs are found when you stop thinking like a tester and start thinking like a confused player at 2 a.m. Unfortunately, that company got bought out, and most of us got laid off. I had to scramble to find a new job, and that's how I ended up at my current place. The pay was decent, and they seemed to understand quality assurance work, so I thought it would be fine. At first, everything was normal. We had our test scripts, but we were also encouraged to poke around and find the weird edge cases that always slip through. I was actually doing pretty well and had caught several major bugs that would have been embarrassing if they'd made it to launch. But then we got a new lead. This guy came from some corporate background and seemed to think quality assurance was just about checking boxes on a list. He clearly didn't understand that games are interactive entertainment, not spreadsheets. Players don't follow scripts. They do weird, unpredictable things that break games in ways you'd never expect. The problem started about 2 months into his tenure. He kept pushing for more efficient testing, which really meant rushing through scripts without taking time to actually explore the game. Several times I tried to explain that some of my best bug finds came from going off script, but he'd just nod and change the subject. Then came the message that would lead to everything falling apart. I was sitting at my desk on a Tuesday morning working through a combat system test when the notification popped up. It was from our lead, sent to the entire quality assurance team. The message told us that from now on, we had to stick strictly to the test script. No deviations, no exploratory testing. We just had to follow the document as written. He said we needed to improve our efficiency metrics. I stared at my screen for a solid minute. This went against everything I'd learned about quality assurance. Exploratory testing is where you catch the truly nasty bugs, the ones that ruin players' experiences and generate angry reviews. But apparently, efficiency metrics were more important than actually finding problems. I looked around the office. My colleague at the next desk was shaking her head. Another guy was typing furiously, probably drafting a response email. But I knew there was no point in arguing. When management makes a decision like this, they rarely listen to the people who actually do the work. Fine. If they wanted strict compliance, I'd give them strict compliance. The next day, I was assigned to test a new patch for a third-person action game. It was one of those fantasy adventure titles with lots of platforming and combat. The kind of game where players love to experiment and try weird things. I pulled up the test script and started working through it methodically. Everything was going normally until I reached step 12. The instruction was clear. It told me to jump on the platform and pick up the health pack. So that's exactly what I did. I jumped on the platform, I picked up the health pack, I marked it and moved on to step 13. Now, normally, I would have spent a few extra minutes on that section. I would have tried approaching the platform from different angles. I would have tested what happened if enemies were nearby. I would have checked if you could pick up the health pack multiple times, or if there were any collision issues with the platform edges. But the lead's message was crystal clear. No deviations. Just follow the document as written. So I didn't move left or right to test the platform boundaries. I didn't run into any nearby enemies to see how the pickup animation handled interruptions. I certainly didn't check what happened if you fell off the platform while holding the health pack. I just jumped, grabbed, and moved on like a good little robot. The rest of my testing session went the same way. Every step followed exactly written. No creativity, no exploration, no actual thinking about how players might interact with these systems. It felt like the most boring day I'd ever had in quality assurance. But hey, I was being efficient. 2 days later, everything came crashing down. I was working on a different test when one of the developers came rushing over to our section. He looked stressed and was carrying a printout of what was obviously a bug report. The developer asked if anyone had tested the health pack pickup on the stone platform in level 3. My colleague, who had been testing the same build, said she thought someone did and offered to check the reports. The developer was flipping through pages and explained that they were getting reports of a soft lock if you pick up the health pack after aggroing a nearby enemy. He said the game just freezes and players have to restart the entire level. I knew immediately what had happened. That was exactly the kind of interaction I would have tested during exploratory testing. When enemies are chasing you and you're trying to grab items while moving, all sorts of weird timing issues can occur. My colleague pulled up the test results and told everyone that the main tester had just marked the pickup as working correctly. The developer looked confused and said this was a critical bug. He explained it was happening to about 1 in 5 players who weren't following some perfect robot path. He wondered how we had missed this. That's when they all turned to look at me. Since I was the main tester on that section, the developer asked why I didn't catch this bug. He said it seemed like it would be pretty obvious if I had tested the area properly. I had 2 choices. I could try to explain the situation and probably look like I was making excuses, or I could let our lead's own words speak for themselves. I opened my email and forwarded the lead's message directly to the developer with no additional comment. The developer read it, and his expression changed from confusion to anger. He asked if I was serious about being told not to do exploratory testing. I told him that was correct. I told him the instructions were very clear about no deviations and just following the document written. The developer stared at the email for another few seconds, then walked off toward management's office. I could hear raised voices through the closed door for the next 20 minutes. An hour later, we got called into an emergency meeting. The lead was there, along with several developers and the project manager. The atmosphere was tense. The project manager started things off by explaining that they had discovered a critical bug that somehow made it through quality assurance testing. He said this was the kind of issue that could have caused major problems at launch. The lead jumped in, clearly trying to deflect. He claimed that their testing procedures were designed to be thorough and efficient. He suggested that if there was a problem with the test coverage, they needed to look at improving their scripts. One of the developers wasn't having it. He said the problem wasn't the scripts, but that the lead had told his team not to think. He pointed out that this bug would have been caught in 5 minutes of normal exploratory testing. The lead's face was getting red when he insisted they needed to maintain consistent testing standards. He argued that following scripts ensures repeatability and proper documentation. The project manager responded that they weren't testing accounting software, but games. He reminded everyone that players don't follow scripts and do random chaotic things that break carefully planned systems. The conversation went back and forth for a while, with the lead trying to defend his efficiency-focused approach. But the writing was on the wall when the project manager pulled out a folder full of similar bug reports that had been trickling in from other areas. Turns out our efficient testing had been missing problems, left and right. The only reason we hadn't noticed was that most of the bugs were being caught by players in early access, which made us look incompetent. Finally, the project manager had heard enough. He announced that, effective immediately, they were returning to standard quality assurance practices. He declared that exploratory testing was not just allowed, but expected. He reminded everyone that their job was to find problems before players do, not to check boxes on a form. Then he turned to our lead. The project manager told him that he needed to spend some time understanding what quality assurance actually involves in game development. He made it clear that this wasn't a manufacturing line. The lead tried to object, pointing out that the efficiency metrics clearly showed they were processing test cases faster than ever before. The project manager shot back that they were also missing critical bugs that were causing customer complaints. He emphasized that speed doesn't matter if the end result is broken games. The meeting ended with our lead being assigned to shadow experienced testers for the next month to relearn the fundamentals of game quality assurance. The rest of us were told to go back to doing our jobs properly. Walking back to my desk, one of the developers stopped me. He thanked me for not letting the situation slide. He mentioned that a lot of people would have just quietly started doing exploratory testing anyway and let management think their new process was working. I told him I figured it was better to let them see the natural results of their decision. He agreed and said it was the fastest policy reversal he'd ever seen at the company. When I sat back down at my desk, I noticed our lead cleaning out his office. Apparently, the retraining was going to happen at a different company. When I went back to test that same health pack area properly, I found 3 more bugs in about 15 minutes. Turns out players could duplicate the health pack by timing their jumps just right, clip through the platform if they approached from the wrong angle, and cause the entire level to break if they picked up the pack while certain visual effects were playing. None of that would have been caught by following the script exactly written, but give a quality assurance tester permission to actually think about what they're doing. And suddenly, problems start revealing themselves everywhere. Funny how things work out when you let people do their jobs properly. This happened about 2 years ago when I was working as a lifeguard at our local water park during the summer. I had just finished my lifeguard certification the previous spring and was excited to have my first real job. The pay wasn't amazing, but I loved being around water and the work seemed pretty straightforward. Plus, the tan was a nice bonus. The water park where I worked was pretty popular with families. We had three main pool areas, several water slides, and a family water playground section with smaller features for little kids. The rules were posted everywhere and were super clear about safety. The most important one was that children under 12 could not go into any pools or on slides without an adult supervisor right there with them. The only exception was a family water playground area, which had no deep pools or big slides, just shallow splash areas and tiny slides meant for toddlers. These rules existed for obvious reasons. Kids can drown in seconds, even with flotation devices. We had training videos showing how quickly things could go wrong. Flotation vests and pool noodles are not life preservers, they're just swimming aids. A kid could easily slip out of a vest or lose grip on a noodle and panic. It was a busy Saturday afternoon when this whole mess started. The pools were packed with families enjoying the weekend. I was stationed at the main pool area, which had both shallow and deep ends. That's when I first noticed this woman lounging on a chair about 200 meters away from the pool, completely absorbed in her phone. Her three kids were in the water by themselves. The oldest looked to be around 10, a boy was a pool noodle. The two younger ones were girls, maybe 5 and 3 years old, both wearing those inflatable arm floaties and vests. They were playing near the shallow end, but they kept drifting toward the deeper water. My colleague Sarah noticed them first and walked over to the woman. Sarah politely explained that the children needed adult supervision in the pool and that the woman would need to either get in the water with them or have them exit the pool area. The woman barely looked up from her phone and dismissed Sarah's concerns. She said that her kids were fine because they had their vests on and couldn't drown. She mentioned that she had just had surgery and couldn't get in the water right now. Sarah tried to explain that the rule applied to all children under 12 regardless of flotation devices and that the vests were not a substitute for adult supervision. The woman argued that her case should be an exception because she literally couldn't get in the water due to her surgery. She claimed the kids were perfectly safe with their vests. Sarah tried to explain again, but the woman just waved her off and went back to her phone. Sarah came back and told me what happened. She said the woman was refusing to supervise her kids and claimed her surgery made her exempt from the rules. I asked Sarah if she wanted me to try talking to the woman, but before I could, Sarah went back over and convinced the woman to get her kids out. Less than 10 minutes later, I saw the same three kids back in the pool. The woman was still planted in her chair, now with a drink in her hand, acting like she was at some private resort instead of a public water park with safety regulations. This time, I walked over myself. I told the woman that she needed to either get in the water with her children or have them exit the pool immediately. She asked if I was kidding and repeated her explanation about having surgery. She said that she couldn't get in the water and that her kids were completely safe because they were wearing safety vests. I explained that I understood she had surgery, but that flotation devices weren't safety guarantees. I told her that children could still drown even while wearing them, and that our policy required adult supervision for all children under 12 in pool areas. She called my concerns ridiculous and argued that the vests were specifically designed to keep kids safe in water. She bragged that her youngest had been swimming with them since she was 2. I explained that those vests were swimming aids, not life preservers. I told her that a child could slip out of them, they could deflate, or a child could panic and tip forward. I made it clear they weren't designed to be used without supervision. She got defensive and claimed she was watching them from right where she sat. She said she could see everything that was happening. I pointed out that she was 200 meters away and that if something happened, she couldn't reach them in time, especially with her recent surgery limiting her mobility. She started getting really agitated. She accused me of discrimination and claimed she was being targeted because of her medical condition. She angrily said that I couldn't force someone who just had major abdominal surgery to get in a pool. I clarified that I wasn't asking her to get in the pool. I explained that I was asking her to either supervise her children from the pool deck area or have them play in the family water playground section, which didn't require adult supervision. She complained that her kids didn't want to play in the baby area and that they wanted to swim in the big pool. I told her that if that was the case, she needed to arrange for another adult to supervise them in the water, or this wasn't the right activity for her family that day. That's when she really lost it. She said that she was calling her husband and that I was going to be in so much trouble for this. While she was on the phone, my colleague and I approached the kids and gently guided them out of the pool. They were actually pretty good about it, though the oldest boy seemed embarrassed by all the attention. I explained to the kids that they needed to stay out of the big pool unless an adult was in the water with them. I told them they could play in the family area or wait for their dad to get there. The 10-year-old nodded like he understood. I felt bad for these kids. They weren't the problem here. I called my supervisor over the radio to explain the situation. When he arrived, the woman's husband had shown up. He was red-faced and walking over like he was ready for a fight. The husband immediately started yelling at me, demanding to know what was wrong with us people. He angrily pointed out that his wife had just had major surgery and couldn't get in the water. He called us insane for enforcing the rule. I told him that I understood his wife had medical limitations, but that our safety policies required adult supervision for children under 12 in pool areas. I explained that this applied to all families regardless of circumstances. He demanded to know what his wife was supposed to do, arguing that she was recovering from surgery and needed to rest, but also wanted to bring the kids somewhere fun. I suggested that maybe right now a water park wasn't the right destination for his wife to spend time with the children. I also asked why he hadn't come to swim with the kids if she couldn't. That seemed to hit a nerve. He defensively explained that he was at work and couldn't just drop everything because of our ridiculous rules. I reminded him that the rules were clearly posted at the entrance and printed on every ticket. I said that children under 12 required adult supervision in pool areas with no exceptions. The woman then accused us of ableism, claiming we were discriminating against people with disabilities and medical conditions. Her husband threatened that they were going to sue the place and called our requirements completely unreasonable. My supervisor finally stepped in. He told the couple that he understood their frustration, but that the safety regulations were non-negotiable. He explained that they existed to prevent drownings and serious injuries. He offered to provide a refund for that day's admission if the wife couldn't supervise the children in the water due to medical reasons. The woman angrily said that they didn't want a refund and demanded that we make an exception for their situation. My supervisor told them that he couldn't make exceptions to safety policies and that these rules applied equally to all guests. The family ended up leaving, but not before making more threats about lawsuits and discrimination. The husband was yelling about how unreasonable we were when they packed up their stuff. A few weeks later, my friend who works at the local television station told me something that made me laugh out loud. Apparently, this family had actually contacted the station, asking them to run a story about how they were discriminated against at our water park. The station declined to run the story after reviewing the facts. But it gets better. About a month after the incident, our park manager got a letter from their lawyer demanding we change our policies and pay damages for discrimination and emotional distress. Our manager simply responded by sending them a copy of the terms of use that were clearly displayed when they purchased their tickets. The terms explicitly said that children under 12 cannot be in pool areas without adult supervision under any circumstances. We never heard back from them after that. The whole thing was just mind-blowing to me. I get that having surgery is tough and limits what you can do, but if you can't safely supervise your kids at a water park, then maybe don't bring them to a water park that day, or bring another adult who can help. The entitlement was just incredible. They genuinely believed that their personal situation should override safety rules that exist to protect children from drowning. What really got to me was how they tried to make us the bad guys for enforcing rules designed to keep their own kids safe. Like we were the villains for not wanting their 3-year-old to potentially drown in our pool. The fact that they thought surgery gave them some kind of exemption from basic water safety was just beyond my understanding. I stayed at that job for 2 more summers after that, and I saw plenty of other entitled parents, but none quite as memorable as the woman who thought her medical condition meant her toddlers could safely swim unsupervised.